All right, we're recording. What's going
Quincy.
on?
Not much, man. It's
How
been
you been? It's been a long time.
no, it's been a few months since we at least like recorded a conversation. Been
Yeah,
texting a little bit.
there's a lot that has happened over the last couple of months. Nothing big, no elections or whatever, but yeah.
It's on the horizon. The elections are, at least.
Oh God.
There's the
But
recent balloon in the air. Have you seen this news recently? The 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 what is it? They're calling it a weather balloon, but there's like a balloon from China that's like hovering in the United States. You haven't heard this?
no,
Yeah, you gotta check it out on and search it after this. But there's like this balloon where someone took a video and it looks like at the moon, and so they started recording, and there's this there's like two moons in the sky, right? And they're like, what the hell is this? And then come to find out, the government's saying that it's a Chinese weather balloon, and they're not like doing anything about it, and now it's just like kind of like hovering all over around the United States. It's pretty crazy. Of course, like the conservative outlets are all saying like, this is bullshit, take action, we need to shoot this down and stuff, and then the government is just saying like, oh, it's a harmless it's just a harmless balloon. Yeah.
that is no, I haven't heard this anywhere. That is
Yeah.
creepy.
It in the last 2 days, I think maybe in the last 36 hours is when it's happened. So that's what's top of my mind right now.
Wow.
But yeah, check that out after.
I'll check that one out.
I sent you a quote from a book I was reading, and it was one of the things that you and I wanted to jump on and talk about around. I was reading this book called "The Life at the Bottom," and the tagline is "The worldview that makes the underclass." And
Mhm.
this guy wrote it, and he's a doctor from London, and he's a doctor in the London slums, but he's also like a psychiatrist too. And he's a conservative guy, writes about conservative things, but what he only became that after he wrote about his experiences with like engaging with these people from the slums. And so then his whole view on what makes the underclass is, a lot of it is their perspective and worldview. And so this quote that I'm going to read to you is I think can start the conversation for us. So he says that in modern welfare states, the struggle for subsistence has been abolished. And subsistence was confusing to me. So that just means like maintaining or supporting oneself at a minimum level. And he says that when he worked in Africa as a doctor, he said the poor engage in crueling, demanding battle to obtain water, food, firewood, and shelter for the day. And he says that this battle gives meaning to their existence. Another day live without hunger, and Kinshasa is a personal triumph, and survival is achievement. And he says, not in my city, in London, and where subsistence is assured, irrespective of conduct, your subsistence is assured to you. And he said that these people are devoid of ambition and interests, and they have nothing to fear and nothing to hope. And so then he says, without religious belief to imbue their existence, they can provide none for themselves from within. And some of that could be controversial, but I think it's a good, thought-provoking at minimum, where we could start. You and I both, I think, have gone through welfare states and completely different sections of the United States and families and cultures. So I think we could talk about that. But just looking into some of the data around, one of the things I was thinking about is like, we look at these programs that are kind of put on us from the government, as we look at them as like being successful without really measuring them quantitatively almost. It's like, what is the measure of success of like a welfare program or any type of assistance program? And it's like, are people employed? Like employment rates you could look at like the percentage of people on welfare. And I was looking at some of those numbers, poverty rates, and it's basically been mostly flat over time. Like it hasn't gotten better or worse. If anything, it's gotten worse slightly, right? And so then if the welfare state is supposed to like help people come out of welfare, then it's like it's not working. And then I looked into, for some reason, fatherlessness,
Mm-hmm.
and not just fatherlessness, it's like single parent homes have skyrocketed in the United States across every race, ethnicity, culture. And some blame it on the welfare state. And so like all of these different measures, I basically, I can't find a measure to say that this is successful. So then it's like, I'm really kind of aligning to this hypothesis that like we can't take people, he calls it subsistence, but we can't take that away from folks.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good learning where I guess you need to go through the suffering on your own in order to overcome the challenges. You could get support from family, but I think the support you need is love, not like monetary things, right? That's my current thoughts.
That's a lot of thoughts, man.
See where that take you.
Two things that, I mean, I would say that there's 10 thoughts there. However, I'm going to go with the most immediate one. I think in accounting, they call it first in, first out. No, that's first in, last out, or something like that. Anyway, I'm going to go with my most immediate thoughts. First, number one, that brings to mind my pinned tweet that's on my account.
Mm.
It literally is what it says. Let me read it to you. And to my surprise, there's a lot of people who are like, what does that mean? They literally don't know what this means. But let me ask you, do you understand what this means when I tell you? Okay, here's what I have. I have diversity, inclusion, and equity does not equal equality. No. Let me rephrase that. Diversity, inclusion, equality does not equal equity.
Mm.
Uplift does not equal tearing something down. More importantly, why can't I talk today? Diversity, inclusion, and equality does not equal self-actualization and self-efficiency.
Mm.
Efficacy.
Oh yeah.
Self-actualization and self-efficacy is greater than diversity, inclusion, and equality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Let me I guess paraphrase back how I think about it is that, and maybe it's because the way diversity, inclusion, and equity or equality is administered in today's time. But in today's time, there's like this presupposition or huge assumption that a disparity is automatically a problem that needs fixed. And then there's also a presupposition and assumption as like what the actual cause of that problem is. So there's like two gigantic like presupposition and problems of like, hey, we assume that there's a problem, and we assume we know what the cause is. And what it is like every disparity is a problem only if it's on a minority that we think is a minority. And then two, the cause is some type of systemic oppression or white male caused. That's the cause. And so like those two things, that like those like, I guess, belief systems from that I guess I have seen is where if you go down that route, then that's not a good route to go down, just because it's like a non-starter. And so like what you were talking about, like self-efficacy and self-actualization, in order to get there, it's kind of like this, you have to empower people, and they have to find some type of purpose and meaning in their life, and you're kind of like cultivating that, and they kind of come through the challenge themselves, and it's not like you are pulling them out of this, but it's more of just like a support and loving friend is the way to get people to self-actualization, versus like, if I'm your friend, Quincy, and I think that you're Black and you need help, and it's like, let me, and I start sending you like $100 a week or something, and I start sending you money. That's not the path to self-actualization, right? It's like I think the path to that is like me being a good friend to you, right? And it's like, that's the best way I can help you to self-actualization, is it's just like being the best friend and a reciprocal behavioral friend to you.
Wow.
And diversity and inclusion don't go there, right? It's not a friendship. It's like, I'm a mother and I need to help my child.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Number one, I like that example, because that's pretty much what it is. Let's take that as that raw example. Let's say that you decide, hey, Quincy is Black and I need to help out my Black friends, and I need to, like, I'm making all this money, so I'm going to give him $200 a week. let me give him an allowance.
Yeah.
To say that even sounds it sounds like emasculated. Like,
Yeah.
That's pretty much what people are asking for. So, but if we go through number one, it's a non-starter for so many reasons. It's a non-starter for number one, because that's not how you empower someone or you can give anyone, like, everyone has, I don't understand why a lot of these people, they ignore their real life experience, or they don't have experience, because a lot of this comes from like really young people. They don't have experience, and they don't have life experience to understand that handouts don't work at all for anything. And poverty is all about what's in your mind. And I'm kind of a little bit nihilistic about that whole subject, because it's like, think about it. I know this is going to get a little deep and I think a little meta. I don't know. But there's a whole bunch of people. If you have a group of people, there's always going to be the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of those people, right? Those people at the top of whatever the group is or the hierarchy is, they understand things. They're at the top for a reason. Now, there could be someone who got in there because they inherited something or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the people who understand how the world works inherently understand this. They understand that in order to get from point A to point B, get from point A to point B, you have to work, you have to change yourself, you empower yourself. And that's the number one thing with poverty. Poverty isn't I don't have the money. It's the way you think. It's the way you were raised. It's your paradigm, the way you view the world. And the reason why I said I'm nihilistic about it is because I don't think that concept will ever change. But I don't think that's nihilistic. I think that's just me accepting reality for what it is. And then if you look at numbers, there's always going to be a hierarchy. There's always going to be someone at the bottom, right? No matter how much money everyone makes, there's always going to be someone at the bottom. When you add that to the fact that these people who are going around and saying, I guess you can call them leftists or whatever, who are all about this diversity, equity. Like there's some good, like I'm not knocking diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm not knocking from a raw theoretical academic thing. However, the problem is that, and this goes back into what you were saying, like a mother, and this probably is going to be controversial to say, but once a society reaches a certain level of affluence, the society no longer needs strong men to protect the average everyday individual. So when that happens, you have a lot of matriarchal components that just go in there, because like now we're at the point where you don't need strong men, and men, like, life is about necessity, which is kind of the basis of this conversation. It's like, if you need to, if life, a lot of people won't do anything unless they're forced to do it. Does that make sense? So that makes you harder. That makes you want to, like those people in an African village, like they have to survive. When you have to survive, you do what you need to survive. But if you don't have to survive, what are you going to do?
Right.
You don't know. You gotta be a matriarch to someone, and that brings in that. And I'm not knocking like a mother or anything. What I'm saying is that the strengths of a male or masculine personality is discipline, it's hard work, it's, look, I'm being broad and I'm generalizing a lot here, but it's like the male understands that he has to do certain things to survive in this world. That's why the male is generally the protector. The mother is like the caretaker, the nurturer, right? In general. And I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to nurture these people. That's why, if you're going to be poor, and this is going to be controversial, if you're going to be poor, I'd rather you be poor in a poor country than poor in a rich country. Why? Okay, that didn't make sense when I said it. Because me, I'd rather be poor in a rich country because I know I have that opportunity. But what it's looking like is for the average individual to be poor in a rich country means that society is affluent, and for the average person, they're not going to have that motivation to be successful as that person who's poor in a poor country. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah. I'm trying to think of the book, what it was called, but there's a stat that I've rattled off in an article before about how Mexicans, native born Mexicans, are what have way less rates of depression and anxiety than Mexican Americans, where it's kind of like that, like the way he described it is, I think it's called Tribe is what the book's called, but how like wealthier nations have like higher rates of depression and anxiety, because I think it's like what you were just talking about. It's like there's this like window of if you're very poor, and it's that subsistence thing where you like you are kind of like you have that self-efficacy because like you're just trying to survive. There's like survival component when you're in the poor of poor. But then like once that is taking care of you, if you don't have so let's say go back to the welfare thing. It's like, okay, welfare comes in or some other aiding program. And now it's like, okay, now you don't have to work. Okay. So if you have kids, okay, you can obviously take care of kids. But then that's like, you need something that brings meaning and purpose to you. Yes, kids do that, but you still need like kids plus that one other thing. That's my belief, at least. And so I think that's one of the things where it's just like Mexicans are way less depressed and less anxious than Mexican Americans, because Mexican Americans come in the United States, and then our government and our programs treat them differently. Um,
Yeah.
there's also the same thing happens in Scandinavia. I was looking at some stats here around there's certain cultures, there's certain people and immigrants that this, like the welfare state and these aid programs happen in a lot of Western countries, and you have some immigrants from like different parts of the country. They'll move and migrate into these countries, and some are, it really doesn't negatively affect them. Some they'll get on these aid programs and can't get off. They become dependent, right?
Yeah.
And this, let me just read off a few things for you. Is like, so in Denmark, Denmark's a Scandinavian country. It said the labor force participation rate is 76% for native Danes in Denmark, and then it's less than 50% for immigrants from non-Western countries, and then as low as 14% for immigrants from Somalia. And so that's like one thing, that's one portion of it. And then in Sweden, they face similar, this is from the book Discrimination, Disparities that you and I both have read. So unemployment among foreigners is twice as high as among native Swedes. And it says in here that like after 10 years in Sweden, only half of asylum seekers have a job. Only half of asylum seekers have a job. So you kind of like, you're a refugee or whatever. So immigrants who are roughly 16% of Sweden's small population have become 51% of the long-term unemployed and 57% of the recipients on welfare. That's pretty, you know, wild. But Thomas Sowell goes into some of the stats as well of like, for some reason, immigrants from Africa don't face that same problem, right?
Yeah.
West Indian immigrants too from the Caribbean, they're not as susceptible to these same things. So there's like certain cultures where, and the Asian Americans as well have roughly have little trouble and are less susceptible. Indian and Asian, Chinese and Asian populations have less susceptibility to this as when they immigrate to these Western countries. And so it's like, my thinking is on this is like, their culture has set them up from a mindset and in like a fundamental structure that prevent it, kind of like inoculates them from the negative parts of it. So like if they need aid, they get it and they're able to easily escape it because they still have that discipline, structure, and perspective. Like I read some on Twitter the other day that 2.8% of Japan, the fatherlessness or single parent homes in Japan is like 2.8%, something ridiculously low like that, right? And then just that fact, and I'm gonna rattle off a few more stats for you, and then you can just pick where you want to go with this. But so I read another book called The Boy Crisis, and it's like why our boys are struggling and what we can do about it. One of the things you were talking about, like the matriarch and patriarchal like archetypes, is like in this day and age, I think the problem isn't matriarch or patriarch. It's like a balance of both. We need a balance of both. Historically, it was heavily more patriarchal. Now it's becoming more matriarchal, and the teeter-totter is like went completely opposite the other way, and now it needs to balance back out. But here's a few stats for you, is that there's a few of them, and this is just going into like different categories and how fatherlessness impacts it. And so poverty and mobility. Children who were born and raised by both parents had an
Oh,
80% chance of moving the middle class or above. Conversely, children who were born in the middle class and raised without a married dad were almost 4 times as likely to end up poorer. Violent crime, next category, every 1% increase in fatherlessness in a neighborhood predicts 3% increase in adolescent violence. That's pretty wild. And then prisons, we know that like most of folks in prison are, it's like 85% didn't have fathers. And homelessness, over 90% of homelessness without fathers, right? Suicide, living in a home without a dad is more highly correlated with suicide among children and teenagers than any other factor. How insane is that? Drugs, I can go on and on. Drugs, bullying, rape, like all of these categories.
can you send me this information, man? This is a
Yeah.
good facts.
And it's wild. Like this book kind of blew my mind. And it goes back to the welfare state as well, because like we incentivize, we mentioned like single parent homes have just skyrocketed since the 60s and 70s when a lot of these programs got put into place. And there's something about it that where you can't, if you get married or you even have a significant other, your like the money you have and income you have coming in takes you away from those benefits. And so it's like incentivizes you to be single, essentially, like a single mother.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was reading into it and preparing for this conversation, like a lot of the wording is interesting. It's like you look at around the history of some of these programs, and it's like trying to support like self-sufficiency of mothers and stuff. And it's like and it's all around like trying to help a single mother. And even the wording kind of was like, you don't need a man type thing, which was interesting. And it doesn't matter. In The Boy Crisis, he talks about like, it doesn't have to be a heterosexual, like even lesbian, gay, etc. Like if there's an intact home with a balanced mother father archetype, then you're gonna be more successful. But if there's only one parent, doesn't matter what they're are on the spectrum of sex and whatever, you're just gonna be less likely because there isn't that balance of. Yep. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm taking from it.
Well, I think that's the biggest, the largest, and that's why I say our society, an affluent society, has become mostly matriarchal, because the biggest lie that is told and repeated is, I don't need no man. That's if I could if I could pinpoint the one phrase, that one phrase has typified pretty much everything that's wrong with the society, as far as how kids are raised, how the courts decide, like in a breakup or a marriage, when the marriage is dissolved, or in divorce, like where the kids go. Because you need, like, I think that since life isn't as hard as it used to be, the value of a man has gone, the perceived value has gone down significantly. Of what a man can bring to the table. And that has ramifications everywhere, man. I mean, you see it in the family, you kind of see it in the workforce, you see it in entertainment, you see it in the way news is presented. Because there's, regardless of how we want to, I don't know, how we want to lie to ourselves and tell us about how things operated, or like the common lie, like I remember it came out, this phrase started like a decade ago, participation trophies, stuff like that. I think there was a Jordan Peterson podcast where he was talking about like the son went and was playing, I don't know, some kind of sport, and it was hard. Which sports is, if you're learning how to play sports on a team, things can get really hard, humiliating, and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so the dad is going to go through, like, what happened, how can we solve this, blah blah blah. You don't need to give up. And what does the mother do? Typically the mother will be the nurturer, like,
Mhm.
pat him, not pat him on the head, or like embrace him, and like if he doesn't want to play, he doesn't have to play, like, and that kind of stuff. um you need both, like you just said. You need both. You need the caring aspect of it. You need the softer kind of aspect of like dealing with issues like that. But our world, our society become has started to believe that you don't need the discipline. You
Yeah.
don't need the tough love.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, tough love is tough because that's in the phrase. So why are we doing something that's tough?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. And it's kind of sad because what you do is you produce men who are not up to the task of I would say, I want to say, of being men, but that's kind of a redundant statement. They're not up to the task of fulfilling that masculine role.
There's it's like we've penalized, or we've de-incentivized that any type of masculine feature. Well, one, because we don't need it, right? Like we don't need, at the current moment, from a military perspective, you know what I mean? Like historically, like the man, we needed that like strong masculine, because it was like you need to prepare him for war. And like war ain't no, if we think sports are challenging, let alone go to war and see what happens. And like, and it's like you have to prepare them from that. It's like you take away war, and it's like, and but people underestimate the subtleness of like of a masculine feature. Like even like you and I have feminine archetypal things that we do, like we are compassionate and empathetic, and talking about it from a traditional perspective of like what those are. But then we have other things like tough love and aggressiveness, and certain things that were like those are positive, and it's like there needs to be a balance. And so then it's like in society, whether it's the diversity and inclusion programs, whether it's the welfare state, whether it's simple things like microaggressions and participation trophies, we are put it in the metaphor of a home. It's like we've ripped the father out, and the mother is there just being like overly motherly and devouring the child. And now the child can't be self-sufficient and take care of themselves. And so then it's like this cyclical thing of like the child ends up being 40 years old and living in your basement.
Yeah.
One of the things, I think you love this book, the boy crisis, because like he gets into, there's research around roughhousing. I have some of the quotes pulled up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it says I'm trying to pull up a good stat for you here, where he talks about some of the how much roughhousing helps. Let me roughhousing. Let's see. It says between 18 and 24 months. Let's see. Roughhousing done more frequently with dads helps regulate both male and female toddlers' aggression, but especially helps male toddlers control their testosterone and dose aggression by imprinting their left brain circuits. Let's see, 80% of, yeah, so like he gets into, I can't find like the research he gets into, but like there's actual research that shows like roughhousing with your children is like very beneficial to a lot of things downstream as they become children and adults. And it's like, you wouldn't think that me roughhousing with my daughter or my son, future son, would have those big benefits. But if like you take that roughhousing concept and you extrapolate it towards like us as adults, like where's the roughhousing? You know, like you and I may do it to each other, but everywhere else, the roughhousing concept isn't, like in the workforce, it's not there, you know. And it's if anything, it actually protects. It's like everything we do is trying to overly protect people. Go ahead.
Well, the question is, when you say that, and it all goes back to defining what is your purpose in life. It's like, okay, it's like these people who research longevity. It's like, okay, well, let's say we do everything we can possibly do so you can live this long life.
Yeah.
End up taking all the joy out of life.
Yeah.
And now you're just living. And that's how you get nihilism. That's how you get people with anxiety. That's how you get all these mental illnesses, because not mental illnesses, I would say anxiety and depression and stuff like that. Because what is your purpose? If you take all the risk out of my life and I don't have to worry about something, or I'm not alive to like, if I walk out on this street and I don't have to protect myself from the cold, or I don't have to protect myself from someone coming to punch me in the face. And it's just like me out here, just like I'm alive and breathing and I have no purpose. What is your purpose then?
Yeah.
All the fear and the roughhousing out of life.
You know what? I wrote this quote up here from what is it called? Man's Search for Meaning. It was written by the psychiatrist that from the Holocaust, Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
He broke down he broke down and said that life is a quest for meaning. And he said that the greatest task for any person is to find meaning in his or her life. And he said 3 possible sources for meaning, 3 possible sources. And he said, in work, by doing something significant, in love, by caring for another person, and 3, in courage during difficult times. So he said, suffering in of itself is meaningless. We give our suffering meaning by the way in which we respond to it. I thought that was pretty damn good.
Yeah, that's on point. That's aligned with what Jordan Peterson has talked about a lot. I mean, you can't go through life without, if you're going to go through life without meaning, then you become a danger to yourself and others. Because when you do that, you're pretty much, there's a combination of like this animalistic things that are going on within you, your hormones and all of that kind of stuff. And then the other half of that is the human side of you. The human side of you is going to want to, I don't know, conjure up conflict where it can, which is kind of the animalistic conflict. So what does it conjure up? Conflict. Oh, so and this is kind of what I see with all this woke stuff. It's like, oh, okay, so there's no problems. Let me invent a problem. Now there's microaggressions. Now, if I don't say your pronouns, your personal pronouns, you're a bigot. It's stuff like that that comes up when you don't have those normal, I would say, the rest of the world is not as affluent as the US, and they have like what you would call normal everyday problems. We don't have a lot of those problems here, but we invent a lot of problems here.
Yeah, and so they are in the same quest for meaning. And so like they are deluding themselves that they're caring for another person, right? It's like if I tell you, so the people that are like so outrageously loud about demanding you to use pronouns aren't, the majority aren't trans folks who are using, or non-binary that aren't using pronouns, right? Like they're not the ones demanding and telling you to splatter it all over everywhere and like telling you to do that. It's the folks that are in this quest for meaning. And it's like them, if I'm looking at this quote back again, it's like, well, the second one is in love. So they're like, they are in this path of, okay, they're caring for another person. They're caring for, but it's already a presupposition because it's like a giant assumption that like, one, they need care for, and two, they know the reason and cause for why they need care for, or they know the solution already, and the solution is pronouns will help it all, right? And it's like, it's the same thing with it's the same with that hypothetical I gave you. It's just like, well, if let's say that I'm that I have that ideology, and it's like, well, Black people are they're oppressed, there's systemic oppression, and there's really no way out of it. And no matter where you go in life, you're susceptible to it. And so like, then I run into a Black person. I'm like, okay, Quincy. And then so there's one, there's a gigantic assumption there. And then there's two, like, what's the underlying cause? Oh, it's systemic, it's oppression, it's a systemic thing that's out there. And then it's also white people, that's the problem. So then let's like diminish their presence, and then so it's like bring them down, bring them up. Let's equity, get everything the same. But that's still a hypothesis, right? It's a hypothesis to a problem that hasn't been validated, you know? And that whole journey that I just explained is like giving that person meaning. You know, it's like we're all on a path to meaning. That's giving them meaning, and it's just like they've created a hypothetical world and derived meaning from it. And now your entire identity is around that, which, you know, this may be a better existence than someone who is nihilist and is resentful and is ready to shoot up a school, right? Because there's that path you can take, but it may not be, you know, like once we add up all of the bodies from the totalitarian regimes, it's like, that's what the extreme version turns into, right? It's like, well, we need this perfect world, and the only way to do that is make everyone equal. Okay, we'll do that. Well, how do we do that? Well, we're going to create we're going to bring down all the aristocrats, and we're going to bring up everyone else, and then we're going to create this thing called communism, and then there's socialism, and everybody's going to be equal. And then it doesn't really turn out too well. so then it's like, one of the things I was thinking about before I went on that rant when you were talking was, if there's this combination of like religion and the death of God. Peterson talks about this a lot, where Nietzsche said that like he had that famous quote, or like, God is dead, or something like that. And so like religiousness has been going down for a long time. And despite what you think about religion, it's like even spirituality and those types of things, same thing has gone down. So let's say we have this huge population that are being cared for and protected by, say, the welfare state in these Western countries that are like, okay, we'll take care of you. And then the interesting thing about when I was looking at those stats, where it's like poverty has been roughly the same percentage, let's say 15%.
Yeah.
The population is being constantly going up, so that from absolute terms, poverty keeps going up, right? The percentage is the same, and so it keeps going up. And so like you have more people without meaning if they don't have it in some type of like spiritual realm. Now they don't have it in like work. So then you have rising single parent homes, so you have less love in the home. So now I'm looking at the 3 ways of meaning that you can derive meaning in your life: courage during difficult times, and love and work. And it's like you rip all those out, then it's like something, it needs to be filled with something. So then you resort to, if you don't have religion, you resort to some type of ideology, and then you can go radical there. Or you go the opposite route, and like it's nihilism and resentfulness, and it's that path. And if you think about those people, a lot of them are like wealthy, the kids of wealthy parents who probably were overprotective, right? It's the same concept on a smaller scale in a familial environment, right? And it's like deadbeat dad, family, wealthy, that like mother was probably overprotective or wasn't there, and and it's that same whole dynamic from a society in there, and it all comes down to meaning. But like, I'm wondering, we're almost an hour in. I'm thinking like, if someone, I remember, I'm trying to reflect on my life, and as a college student, and even like out of college, the work isn't there. And then I'm going through the things of meaning here, and it's like love is there, but you really don't, at least this is my experience, like love is there from your family and stuff, but you like don't appreciate it as much as like a young adult, because like the love you're looking for is from someone else, intimate love, right? So like that's the love that you're missing. Only later on do you start appreciating, the love from your family. At least that's my experience. And so as a college student, I reflect on my life, and then it's like encouraged during difficult times. College is a difficult time, so there you have courage, and you get through it and stuff. There's some meaning there, but like it's rough as like a young adult, so there's a huge meaning crisis.
Dude, like, I don't know why my mind went there, but as you was going through that, I was like, okay, if you take religion out, and that's why I've only started to appreciate religion just over the last few years or so. If you take religion out, my assumption is that people still need something. They still need love. They still need courage, encouragement during difficult times. And what's the other one about significance?
In work, doing something significant.
Doing something significant. Like, think about it. Like, if you take out religion, then where is that courage during difficult times going to come from? Social media. Now you have all kinds of snake oil salesmen, like all these ads for this. Okay, so what if I'm that guy who's looking for love, or I don't know, I see an ad for some kind of penis enlargement pill or something like that. Like, but that's low level. But think about on a higher level, like how, and this is getting into some Kevin Samuel stuff, but like young women, when they see that, let's say that young woman has grown up in a single parent household, and she has grown up with her single mom who probably hates her father or something. Then she goes out in the world, and you got the news media, you got everyone selling this ideology of like, I don't need no man, or something like get your degree, don't worry about a man, you can do it by yourself, or men are insignificant, you don't need them in your life, or You need to, and the cycle just what it does is it's just like it multiplies on itself. You have people who don't have meaning, then they find meaning in the wrong places. They find that
Yeah.
encouragement during difficult time and meaningful places. The reason why I brought up like ads on social media, so you don't have to be served ads on social media to get involved with something, because social media is like a cesspool of different beliefs, of different things that are shown that are not to your betterment.
Mhm.
And all you're doing is you're living in a society where, like, let's say this woman she was like, okay, well, I don't need a man. I'm going to school. I'm getting my education. I'm going to be, I'm going to be educated and all this other stuff. And then that is reinforced with media, either social media, news media, or the things we see out in the world. And no one is putting up the image, oh, you need a strong male in the household, or you need this person in the household. And then as a marketer, I understand this stuff, because you only first of all, you're only marketing to where there is a audience, or there is people who are buying what you're selling. And if you're selling hope, you don't sell hope to people who don't need hope. You sell hope to people who need hope. You know what I'm saying? So if you're selling hope to people who are downtrodden, or they've already had this idea about what the way the world is, then you just keep on giving them that. And that's where you find, like, I hate the word woke, but like, that's why you keep seeing it in these corporations and their ads, and what they're like, oh, I'm going to do this weird thing to appease this crowd over here because it's prolific in social media. I have stats on social media. I know how many people are clicking on it. Could be some kind of mental disabled dude whose only out is social media, and he does something stupid or out of control and whatever. And he has this message that, like, maybe he's like, I don't know, a social justice warrior or something, gets clicks, gets impressions, eyeballs. Corporation sees that. That's what's getting clicks. That's what's getting eyeballs. So we have to spit out that stuff. And it's almost like a cycle, a downhill cycle of the whole society. I hope that was.
I'm wondering, I was thinking about this the other day. It seems like the more content, the more content and more information that people have, the less clear the clear they are and like their beliefs. There is like the paradox of choice. You've ever heard that principle, or we're in like in UX design and shit, where like you give someone 5 call to actions and they're less likely to choose something if it was 2 or 1. It's basically that on fucking steroids in the social media and everything else. And it's like, well, if you have too much information, it seems like too much information increases the likelihood of like delusions and conspiracies and everything, to where I was trying to think about, like, how do we create an environment that is supportive of, like, at least an diversity in information of, like, and beyond that, it's that plus dialogue, like like there needs to be a dialogue that isn't protected from, like, doesn't protect people from their opinions and beliefs. Like the only protection I need from my beliefs is like if there's a mob taking me out, not letting me speak. But we need a diversity of opinion, then we need like freedom of speech. I'm breaking down the
Bill of Rights, or
I'm breaking the institution of this country. But like, the one thing that happens with like these corporate initiatives is people are protected because they're coming off as motherly and protective, and it's all compassion. We don't see the negatives of it's hard to see the negatives of compassion and and protecting. Like you don't see the negative. It's not clear to people, right?
You
And so
probably
people are protected from doing that. If you come in and it's like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Oh yeah, go ahead and do that. Next thing you know, your culture's disrupted from the middle. It's like a virus that spreads, and then like there's no room for like freedom of speech is gone, and like people can't. And so then it's like, how do we create this like this point where there's like ideas are the only way is like what you and I have done and over the past like 3-4 years is just like write the writing and just hopefully you write well enough that it gets out there and sees more eyes. That's the only way I can.
Well,
That's my solution.
there is, I mean, this is one of those problems that you really like. I don't think anyone has a clear-cut solution. Well, okay, there are people with clear-cut solutions. The only problem is that either they don't get either those solutions are too restrictive, or it's sort of like religion is a ready-made solution to this. Like if you put someone in a religion, you raise them from infancy on, and they have this religion, that pretty much solves a lot of these problems. But the problem with that is, how will they learn and grow to a worldview? It's like a double-edged sword. How will you learn and grow outside of that religion?
Right.
It's all,
See, that point you made though, it's like maybe because like religions are best made for like small tribes, and it's not made for the modern world
I don't know. Well, yeah,
and
like,
modern society.
well, it goes back to my standpoint, and this is what I think I'm being unfair to my idea when I call it nihilist, because it's really not nihilist. It's like, regardless of how you shape it, regardless of what you do to solve what problems you want to solve, you're always going to come up with a small percentage of the crowd who gets it or who can navigate it, and the vast majority don't, which is really fucked up. Like because even in that scenario, let's say you raise this person in religion, blah, blah, blah. The vast majority of those people who were raised in their religion, they're going to want one or two things. They're going to either grow up in that religion and grow up, and they're going to be hardcore fundamentalists.
Yep.
And then that breeds bad things.
Yeah.
Or that they're going to be hardcore anti-religion and just go the opposite end,
Yeah.
which that breeds bad outcomes.
Yeah.
Very few who can like get in there, figure out like, I'm gonna retool my own brain to figure out how to navigate this, be a nice person, be a productive person, have the mother and the father in my head combined so I can navigate this world, be successful, but still understand bad things and not coward, not give in to, like, I don't know, the mob mentality, or give in to either the fundamentalists or the extremists on the opposite side of the thing. There's very few people who can navigate all of that.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you were talking about the religion portion and breaking that down, that all made total sense. But then I was thinking like Eastern religions have kind of helped have been an easier adjustment into like Western societies, because they're polytheistic in nature, and that's more like intrinsic. It's almost like self-improvement from the inside out. It's kind of like what like Buddhism and Hinduism kind of do. It's just like, how do I meditate, go internally and improve myself? And then it's very open-minded and not divisive as far as like, okay, people outside of my belief systems. Now, of course, there are like sects of those religions that have in history have been violent and go down those same paths as all belief systems can do. But I think it's less likely. But you're not going to get that. Still isn't a solution either, because like you can't change. Like I, as a father, and my wife could make a decision now, right? And like we're gonna pick a religion, and let's say it's Buddhism, and then we're start going to a Buddhist church. You know, I thought about this, like as a father of 1.5-year-old, I go on runs around my community, and there's a shit ton of churches, and there's a diverse set of churches, right? There's Catholic churches, there's a Buddhist place over here, there is a Hindu church over here. And there's like all of these different denominations that literally I could just go to be completely open-minded and go to one, like 4 times a month, go to the different one each time. And would that confuse my child? You know, would it confuse her? Would it give her like a perspective across like every person's belief systems, and maybe she could pick out like the hypothesis would be like my daughter could be exposed to all of them and pick all the good parts out of all of them, right? But it's a tough one, because you know, you and I have talked about this before. Like we went down the path of like being religious, leaving it, going down the wrong path, the opposite the other way, and then kind of like rebalancing ourselves. But then again, it's like, well, now how do you raise a child in that world to do that? And it's like you have to do it like we've been talking about, right? We can't be like overly protective. We just got to empower them, allow them to kind of like go through it, but they also need structure and tradition and appreciation for that. So it's a tough task. It's a tall task.
Very tall task, man.
Extrapolate that to society, like my 1.5-year-old daughter, you know, extrapolate that across society. It's like you're not chasing Western culture overnight. But yeah, it's a tough one. I do think that like writing and like really good content travels far and can help. And then like more people that are doing that, like if more people write and more and then like engage in conversation and dialogue through that way, it can have like a small incremental like compounding effect as more people do it. But as far as like solving the problem we were talking about, I don't know. I think it's something we'll have to come back to.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is I look at it like I read this book, Thinking in Bets. It's a really good book.
Is that Annie Duke? Is that who wrote that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I haven't read that yet, but I've heard people talk about it.
So yeah, it's very good. I mean, yeah, I think in bets, and that's how like my mind does calculations. And it's like, so if I had that scenario, the only option, if you had a scenario like, let's say you had 5 or 6 different religions and all of this kind of stuff, what you do know is that you can't do nothing, right?
Yeah.
And then if you choose one, then each one has its own set of pros and cons. My choice would be do anything but not nothing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, because like those are your choices. It's like, what harm could it do? Because regardless
Right.
of what happens, each one has those pros and cons. And
Right.
if you don't do anything, you don't get any pros or cons.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
I think it's a good I think that's a good finishing touch, because like you could extrapolate that to everything we just talked about. Because like doing something is a path towards something meaningful, potentially. Doing nothing, you're not going to drive any meaning from anything. I think that's a good way to end it.
yeah, that's dude. I'm gonna go read that book, man. That's a
I'm gonna read the Thinking it Best because I've heard it way too many times recommended.
oh, it's so good, man. It's helped me a lot in bets and in real life. But
I
yeah,
I hear my daughter starting to get fussy in the other room. I'm gonna have to bounce here in a few minutes.
all right. So yeah, let's talk in a few upcoming weeks. I know it's hard to arrange this or whatever, but
Yeah, definitely.
all right,
You
man.
want to stop recording?
Yep.
Yeah.